Was a family that could have been considered American royalty, the Kennedys would have been it, according to Biography.com. But despite all the fame and fortune in the world, the clan seems to be plagued by a mysterious curse that sends its members to an early grave. Keep listening, and together we will explore the American dream and how that dream can turn into a nightmare. After listening to my speech, my audience will be convinced that the Kennedy family has been plagued by a strange curse that has caused immense tragedy and misfortune throughout the decades. By using our class survey and the survey that I made, I know that per the age group of my class, all being under the age of 50, and with 95 percentile having some kind of open mind about the paranormal, I believe that the class will find my topic to be both informative and entertaining. I have been interested in conspiracy-like topics and events since early childhood. I have read countless books on the subject and have been myself a lifelong enthusiast of the unexplained. Today I will prove to you that the Kennedy curse is very real and has greatly affected this American family. To do this, I will explain how the Kennedys became the powerful and political force that they were, and the background story of the family, and the effects that it had on the family. In order for you to understand how the Kennedys became one of America's most powerful and influential families, I will need to tell you how the patriarch, Joseph Kennedy Sr., amassed his personal fortune. He rubbed shoulders with America's elite and groomed his sons from birth for a life of public service. Joseph Kennedy dreamed of his family to one day be in the White House. By becoming very rich, he was able to use his political influence to bring his sons into a place of power, and because of this, a Kennedy held a place in political office in America for 64 years. According to John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, Joseph Kennedy was a Harvard graduate. At the age of 25, he was working as the president of a bank in Boston and held a second job as a shipyard manager. Before the stock market crash in 1929, Joseph Kennedy made large investments and was able to cash out before the Great Crash. In doing so, made a large sum of money. He was a huge supporter of the Democratic Party. He was able to rub shoulders with the political elite and worked as an overseas ambassador for the United States, a very coveted and prestigious position. This allowed him to make political connections that would catapult his family to new political heights. In 1914, Joseph married Rose Fitzgerald, and together they had 4 sons and 5 daughters. Their father, Joseph, had high expectations for his children. According to the American Experience found on PBS.com, Joseph himself had a failed run in politics, so he funneled all of his ambitions into his sons. The children were expected to read the New York Times newspaper at very young ages. At the dinner table, only current events and political topics were to be discussed. During family meals, Joseph Sr. expected his children to be nothing less than the best and the brightest. Despite his children becoming senators, presidents, and everything Joseph could have ever hoped for, these accomplishments have become overshadowed by death and tragedy. One by one, the Kennedys' children's lives were snuffed out, untimely and tragically. One explanation for these seemingly odd amount of youthful deaths point to the curse being brought on by Joe himself. Were the children's tragedies a direct reflection of the sins of the father? There are 2 versions of the curse origins. In the first, a rabbi and his companions were fleeing the Nazis aboard an ocean liner ship in 1937. The second involves Joseph's failure to help a Jewish man smuggle his children out of Nazi-occupied Europe. Edward Klein, in his book, The Kennedy Curse, Why Tragedy Has Haunted America's First Family for 150 Years, describes these 2 incidents. In the first, Joseph Kennedy Sr. was aboard a ship returning home after visiting the Court of St. James while serving as an ambassador for the United States. During the voyage, the Jewish men began fervently singing and praying in honor of their high holy day of Rosh Hashanah. They were worshiping and singing loudly, as was their custom. Joseph Kennedy Sr. demanded that the captain put a stop to all the noise, as it was disturbing him and his fellow passengers. The rabbi engaged Kennedy with an angry response, telling him that because of his disrespect, he was placing a curse on him and all of his descendants. The second version includes a Jewish refugee who came to Joseph Sr. and begged for his assistance to smuggle his sons out of Nazi-occupied Europe. He wanted to save his children from the camps. Joseph Sr. ignored the man's pleas, and because of this, the man placed a curse upon him. The curse said that whatever happened to the Jewish man's sons would be the same fate Joseph's sons would see eventually. It's an interesting parallel that the Jewish man's sons were murdered by the Nazis, and 2 of Joseph's sons were also murdered. Now comes the time where I must make good on my promise to prove to you that this American family of privilege is indeed cursed, and I am saddened to say that the evidence is bountiful. After watching the documentary, The Unauthorized Story, The Kennedy Curse, produced by Janssen Media, I learned that year after year, the Kennedys' beloved children met terrible fates. Joseph did see his dream realized by having a son in the White House, and another as a senator, but their lives were snuffed out far too soon. The curse seems to begin in the 1940s and reaches all the way to 2012. Tragedy strikes the family hard through the 1940s and 60s, all the way through the 60s. In 1941, it seems to begin with Rose's eldest child, Rosemary Kennedy. She's mentally ill and is prone to fits and mood swings. The doctors prescribe a lobotomy to fix her issues. The lobotomy fails. It leaves her in a completely incapacitated state for the rest of her life. In 1923, she's committed into an institution for the rest of her life, completely unable to care for herself. 4 years later, in 1944, the eldest of the Kennedy sons, Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., was serving in World War II as a pilot. His plane crashes and he is killed over the English Channel. His sister, Kathleen Kennedy Cavendish, in 1949, loses her life in yet another plane crash. Her husband was the pilot, and he also perishes. She was 28 years old. President John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline's second son, Patrick Beauvoir Kennedy, breathed his last August 7th after being born 6 weeks premature. This was in 1963. The day that the American public will never forget, John F. Kennedy is taken by an assassin's bullet in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd. He was only 46 in 1963. In 1964, the youngest of the Kennedy children, Senator Edward M. Kennedy, cheats death and walks away from a car crash that kills the life of another person within the vehicle. On June 5th, 1968, a second son is taken by an assassin's bullet. Robert F. Kennedy is shot in Los Angeles at the age of 42. Robert had just won California's Democratic presidential primary election. In 1984, at the age of 28, Robert Kennedy's son David A. Kennedy succumbs to a drug overdose in Palm Beach, Florida. A skiing accident in Aspen, Colorado claims the life of Michael Kennedy in 1997. He was 39 and had just been caught cheating on his wife by the media. John F. Kennedy Jr., while flying his own private plane, crashed off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, killing himself, his wife Carolyn, his sister-in-law Lauren Bessette. This was in 1999. In 2002, Michael Skakel, a nephew of Ethel Kennedy, was found guilty of murder. A Connecticut jury found him guilty of the 1975 murder of Martha Moxley. He was 15, and so was his victim. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison in 2002. In 2002, also, Senator Edward, or as he was affectionately known as Ten Kennedy, was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. In 2009, this same brain tumor took his life. The most recent case of the tragedy succumbed by the family is in 2012. Mary Richardson Kennedy, at the age of 52 years old, takes her own life in a barn just outside of her home in Bedford, New York. She was going through a nasty divorce with her husband, Robert F. Kennedy. How can this many deaths be just coincidence? I have explained how the Kennedys became the powerful political force that they were. I have told the background story of the curse and the effects that it had had on the family. Are curses real? How would you feel being born to a family that is surrounded by high-profile death and scandal? We cannot change who we are born as, or what family we come into. Live each day as your last, because you never know when the hand of death, whether it be natural or supernatural, may come and take you to the great unknown of the beyond. I hope that I have convinced you that the Kennedy curse could really be true, and if not that, have opened your mind to not everything in this world may be as it seems. Thank you for your time.